Thank you, Dr. Singh. You've given us a lot to think about as we dive into this next conversation, which tries to bring together two ends of the lifespan that are frequently talked about as separate topics. Many of you in philanthropy have supported early childhood development for many of the reasons that Dr. Singh mentions. But increasingly, we are seeing, with demographic trends, philanthropists are asking, what are the opportunities to support a longer life and a healthier life for more of those years? And our panel is going to dive into this. I'd love to start by thanking all of you for being part of this conversation. You've come from very far away. And we look forward to bringing you a new way to think about the connection between the earliest years and the latest years of our lives. Pia, can we start with you? Why do you see it important that we bring these two conversations together?
Thanks so much. I would like to begin by thanking the Philanthropy Asia Alliance, the Temasek Trust for inviting UNICEF, and Laura for getting us started. It's a really good topic, and I think when we talk about children and older adults as separate policy issues, I think we miss something very fundamental about human development, which was shared in the presentation earlier. Healthy aging actually begins very early in life, right? We just learned how the foundations of resilience, the emotional regulation, the learning, the long-term health is shaped in early life, continuing through adolescence. We heard the most fascinating presentation, how much the first 1,000 days matter. And I also want to build on that on other windows of opportunity, such as adolescence. That's when the brain is stretching. It's learning to take risks. It's identifying who we are. And all of this, as we've learned, is very much nurtured by the context. The DNA is just the blueprint. It's the environment that shapes it. The quality of caregiving, the learning, the opportunities we have. And as we're listening to that and we're sitting and talking about Asia, I do want to talk about a point that's really critical in this life course. UNICEF analysis is showing that over 65% of children in East Asia and Pacific are already experiencing 4 or more climate and environmental shocks compared to the global average, which is only 37%. So when we are talking about healthy aging, we have to talk about what kinds of childhood are children living today. Because what we see in later life, in health outcomes, livelihoods, productivity is an accumulation. So maybe for us in this conversation, we don't talk about children and aging as two sides, but we talk about how societies are choosing to invest consistently in the full arc of human development.
Thank you for that. Brian, I'd love to turn to you and your research. Talk to us a little bit about what this means from a healthy longevity perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think a lot of it has been said, and I'll just come at it from the opposite side of the spectrum. But, you know, medicine has been about sick care for a long time. You know, it's waiting until people get sick. You go spend a lot of money trying to treat whatever disease you have. And we're slowly beginning to see this transition to real health care, which is a life course approach. It starts in early childhood. I mean, you heard that from Dr. Chong already, that we need to set these kids up for healthy lifestyles, for healthy decision making, and for options that they can choose that are going to keep them healthy when they become adults. We need approaches for people from adolescence through adulthood that are optimizing their health, optimizing their function, their performance. And that involves coaching, and it involves education, it involves interventions potentially before people get sick. And all of these things are achievable. And if we do that, we're going to have a healthy older generation. And then the opposite side of that spectrum is what better ambassadors to help young children growing up than grandparents, than the older generation who have the wisdom and hopefully still the health that can feed back and tell these younger children what they want to achieve in life. And so I think it's a full circle, but it has to be a life course approach.
Thank you for that. And Nuriya, tell us how this relates to the work you're doing from the Bharti Airtel Foundation.
Thank you. You know, I've been thinking about this whole morning. We've been sitting in this room. We're talking about life, longevity, and health. And I'm going to step back for a second and say 250 million kids go to school in India. If I look at India, Singapore, China, and the countries that we represent here, I'm pretty sure that the largest population of school-going children comes from countries represented in this room. The other thing that we do know about countries represented in this room is that more and more both parents are going out to work, right? More and more you have kids being dropped off to school in the morning and mums off and dads off. And mum and dad are coming back 8.5 hours, sometimes 9 hours later. And kids come back to school after 6 hours. They have homework, they have sports, they have their lunch, they have their social activity, very often minus both the parents. And in this conversation, what seems to be the central figure emerging, and that's our work at Bharti Airtel Foundation also, the central figure that's emerging is actually the role of the teacher. Because the teacher is the only one, especially in primary school, that child sees for 220 days for 6 to 7 hours a day. In my context, that is the role, that is the figurehead who's also giving lunch, because in India, the underserved communities are provided lunch. So that's the figurehead that's giving lunch. So you have a teacher who's central to this conversation. You have parents who are out of home. You have a child who's growing up being competitive with today's technology and social media access, and then we are expecting the parent and the child and the teacher to be healthy. There's something that we as a community need to address, which is what the work that we've been doing at Bharti Airtel Foundation for the last 25 years is trying to address, saying that how do we keep teachers and the community at the center of this conversation, and move the dialogue to this hidden infrastructure that exists, that bond between a teacher, her parent, and the child, and how do you strengthen that?
Hidden infrastructure is a great way to think about so much of what is missing, whether we are thinking about early childhood, middle life, or later in life. I'd love to pinpoint some of the places where you're seeing the biggest gaps today that we should be thinking about. And Brian, I'd love to start with you, especially because I think the space of longevity and healthy aging is a newer space for philanthropists. Can you tell us a little bit about the gaps that you see?
Yeah, I think that that era between, say, 30 and 60 years old is probably the biggest gap right now in healthcare. And because a lot of people in that age range, they're not going to the doctor, they're not getting checkups. It's partly on them for not doing that, but it's not happening. And then, if you look at doctor's offices, they're seeing so many patients that they have a doctor has maybe 8 minutes with a patient. They don't have time to talk about prevention and lifestyle choices and educate people on what to do. And so we're just missing that. And that's the optimal time to really do interventions. I'm confident that we can, for everyone, that comes into the doctor's office, there are interventional choices that involve lifestyle and maybe other things that are going to optimize not only their health, not only keep them healthy longer, but optimize their performance. And if we put the effort into that, we can find that for each individual. And the economic value of doing that is tremendous, because if you keep people healthy 3, 4, 5 years longer, that saves tens of billions of dollars. So it's worth the investment to do that. We're capable of doing that, but we have to rethink what healthcare looks like. And maybe it doesn't involve doctors meeting with every person that comes into the office. Maybe they're educated nurses or other kinds of specialists that can really help people make the right choices and take the right options while they can still have the biggest impact, and that's before they get sick.
Yeah, that's great. And I know many people work on that workforce question. If we're able to keep people healthier longer, what does it mean in the workforce? Brian, Wilson, I'd love to turn to you, because I think Google must know more about us than anybody else. What does Google's data tell us about how children are learning, as well as how older people are engaging with tech, and how do we think about the accountability, holding the tech sector accountable for this interface that we're only seeing increase as we age?
All right, well, first, thank you all for allowing us an opportunity to spend some time with you during this, this discussion. Look, accountability, I think, for the tech sector really means that we're ensuring that everyone has the knowledge and skills to use AI in ways that benefit them. And the accessibility gap isn't limited to connectivity. It really is whether the tools that we're building are being able to be used by the people that need them the most, right? We can't have the digital divide turn into an AI divide. And what we know from the data is that children from underserved communities and older adults with low digital literacy skills are being left behind, largely because the technology is not built for them. So accountability really is ensuring that the benefits of AI reach every part of the society from day one. So across the Asia-Pacific region, the data also shows that people believe that AI can be beneficial. 77% of educators, 79% of university students believe that putting AI into use could benefit them. Yet there's a huge gap in formal training. Students are adopting the tools, but the schools are actually waiting for the frameworks to be put in place. So in 2024, Google.org launched the AI Opportunity Fund in Asia Pacific, largely focused on skilling programs. Recently, we announced that we're adding $10 million to that fund, bringing the total contribution to $37 million, specifically focused on educators and students. AI literacy is as foundational today as reading and writing, and technology can actually bridge some of the gap where we have teacher shortages, but also by focusing on individualized learning plans, meeting students where they are, and helping meet their specific learning needs. I'll give you a couple examples of this. In India, we've partnered with Rocket Learning. They have a Gemini companion called Apu. And what Apu does is it provides both educators and parents with early childhood resources to help cognitive and socio-emotional foundational skills that's helping millions of young people across India have access to quality early education that they wouldn't otherwise have. In older adults, as Dr. Kennedy, as you mentioned, with older adults, it's really the health literacy is where we see the divide. And I think accountability in this space is really about independence. AI can be used to translate these very complex diagnostic information into relatable, understandable, conversational data, so we shift people from being passive recipients of healthcare to being active managers of their own healthcare, right? Like they're able to be in the game and manage their own healthcare. So I do think this accountability question boils down to how do we ensure that everyone has the knowledge and skills to be able to put AI to use for their own benefit.
Thanks for that. Nuriya, Wilson's mentioned the role of teachers. I wonder if you can speak about the tech and the teachers that you're seeing and the gaps, really, that the philanthropic community can think about.
Yeah, no, I think Wilson's absolutely right. I think today historically, we stand at an inflection point, at least in the education world. We stand at this inflection point, and I know I'm going to reveal my age by saying this, but over the last 25 years, we've seen that every new technology is supposed to be, to solve the education crisis. I remember in the 2000s, we thought if you have computer labs everywhere, you'll solve the education crisis. And then you said, okay, flip learning has come, and you're going to solve the education crisis. And then let's have a device in every kid's hand, and that will solve the education crisis. And I don't think it's solving the education crisis. I think today we are at that point of time where if we don't address how best to leverage the potential of technology today and AI in particular, we can do more damage than good. So now the conversation has changed. The conversation is not about improving education. The conversation is now leveraging it like never before. Otherwise, the risk is far more. And that's that point of inflection that we stand today. And at Bharti Airtel Foundation, we've taken a big, we've put ourselves on the ground saying, let's invest in the teacher. It's, as philanthropy, it's not sexy. No private equity wants to fund with teachers because it's just easier to go to students. Private equity valuations are better when you go to students. You can show that you have replaced the teacher. You have shown that you have added personalized learning. So all these points are there for the student as a consumer. The teacher as a consumer of using technology, using AI, it's a different environment because that's when we say that let's provide resources, let's provide AI tools, let's provide personalized professional development for teachers, because while we think that we provide professional development to the teachers, when we do professional development ourselves, it's mentoring, coaching, yet we put 50 teachers in a classroom and we say, okay, now we're going to train you. That's not how adults learn. It's what I need in my classroom just before I'm entering. How do I need to teach fractions in a multi-grade, multi-level learning? How do I have 3 kids that are differentiated, 4 kids, one may be, having a behavioral disorder requirement, one may not be coming back, one may have come back from lunch and have had too much sugar. How do I address this diversity in the classroom? And I think today the potential of AI, the potential of having that just in time is available for the teacher, and that's our big bet as we invest in looking at AI tools, personalized learning, professional development, and being a philanthropy. It's going to be for life, for free, for teachers.
Pia, would you like to build on that in terms of what UNICEF is seeing vis-a-vis gaps and/or the role of tech in your work?
Both super amazing areas to go in. Maybe start with the gaps, and then I want to build on Nuriya's point with teachers. The way I see it, there are 3 big gaps in the education system globally: learning denied, learning delayed, learning disrupted. Learning denied. In 2026, we still have children, hundreds of millions of children out of school. And in Asia, the percentage of girls out of school, adolescent girls out of school, is staggering. Learning delayed. Children are showing up to school, the school bell rings, they're showing up to school, but learning isn't occurring in the classroom. On average in this region, 70% of 10-year-olds cannot read a basic sentence. Something is wrong in the system. And learning disrupted. Climate change, conflict. Just last year, 250 million children, let that number sink in, 250 million children had their learning disrupted due to climate impact. These continual challenges are putting children behind. And what bothers me the most in this is the inequity. And we talked about inequity on the health panel. I want to bring inequity back on the learning agenda. What bothers us is that the most advantaged continue to get what's needed. And here I want to come to the digital solution in a quick moment. I'm 210% with you, Nuriya. We've had 2 decades of EdTech at scale, 2 decades. And in those 2 decades, what changed for learning outcomes? Not much.com. Because the EdTech solutions were not geared for the global south. They were chasing a commercial enterprise. And as you've said, the pedagogical practice needs to shape the commercial enterprise when it comes to education. And the beating heart of that are teachers. Teachers are the beating heart. Learning is relationship driven. So it's not the tech solution that fascinates us. It's the ability for the solution to build for those neuronal synapses we just learned about that can form at the pace of 1 million per second. those neuronal synapses that make the brain so powerful need relationships to learn, not technology. Teachers are at the heart of that. So 210% equity-driven, safe, teacher-centered solutions to take forward.
Thank you for that. Out of all of these pieces, these gaps, EdTech standing alone is not one of the primary solutions, but integrated in these ways. I'd love to touch on the other promising interventions that you all are seeing in your experience. And Brian, maybe we can start with you, going to the other end of the life course. What are some of the broad areas of opportunities that you see?
Well, I think one of the major breakthroughs that's happened in the last 10 or 15 years is we can now measure aging. We can measure biologic aging. Your passport measures chronologic aging, but we all know people age at different rates, and it had been very difficult to understand how to do that. We now have strategies using blood markers and some other methodologies where we can assess how you're aging. And that's a personal data point or endpoint that we can use for clinical studies. And so now we have the opportunity to take a whole range of different interventions, which could be lifestyle, stress management, sleep management, diet, exercise, social connectivity. We can look at how those things affect your biologic age. We can also look at supplements, repurposed drugs, and even other technologies that are emerging. So we can begin to match up interventions to personalized aging at the individual level and say which things work to optimize the health for which people. This is a tremendous opportunity, and it takes the resources to put into the clinical studies to validate what's working in which people. But once we can move that forward, get that momentum going, I think that the healthcare benefits are going to be tremendous. And so that's what I see as the real opportunity right now.
Great. And as the three of you have spoken about the role of tech, I'd love to come back to this question around how we make sure that tech is a complement, artificial intelligence is a complement to human intelligence. And here, I'm curious whether we can hear, Wilson, how Google is making bets on AI in education. And then, Pia, I'm curious how you're seeing this intersect with some of your work. But Wilson, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, let me start by saying the conversation has been fascinating because I do think there's a huge intersection between the health issues that we're talking about and the education issues that we're talking about. And incidentally, these are two of the areas where AI, I think, is most promising. And what I'm also hearing in the conversation here is a bit of urgency, right? Technology gaps in the past have taken decades, as you mentioned, Pia, to close, and we haven't largely been successful in closing those gaps. And we just don't have the luxury of time when it comes to AI. Things are moving very, very, very quickly. And I don't think it's a question of AI versus the teachers. The real question is whether AI can extend the reach of good teachers, good caretakers, particularly in those instances where they may be stretched too thinly or they're not there at all. And we've seen some good examples of this across the life course, right? For very young people. In Singapore, for example, educators like Carmoon, who's supported by our AI Opportunity Fund, they're using Gemini to redesign the school routine, which is actually allowing teachers to shift their focus from administration to supporting the individual growth of their students. For older kids, that kind of mid-range kids, the AI Ready ASEAN initiative, it's a partnership with the ASEAN Foundation. They've provided AI literacy, essential AI literacy and critical thinking skills to over 5 million young people across Southeast Asia. And it's that critical thinking skills, I think, is the antidote to some of the heavy interventions of technology in the classroom, like making sure our young people are developing that essential skill. And then for our older adults, one good example of this from the health side of the equation, Laura, in Taiwan, we're partnering with the Humanitarian Association there to turn a 20-minute diabetes risk assessment into a 25-second check-in, which is benefiting over 10 million Taiwanese residents and getting the very quick assessment around diabetes. Another example of this is in Japan, where we are partnering with Tohoku University to use AI and Google Street View for reminiscence therapy, so helping improve cognitive function for for elder folks. And so I do think both the health and education are spaces where AI can do a lot of benefit, but it's going to require us to really focus on ensuring that those benefits are widely shared. And so I think the question for tech is this technology and our deployment of this technology, is it improving human relationships or is it bypassing those relationships? And I think as we're all engaging in these programs, that's the question that we should answer first.
I love the way you put that, because this is both institutional and societal, but it's also quite personal. That personal relationship with a teacher, our personal relationships with our kids, their relationship with tech. I found it very heartening that it's not too late in adolescence to get kids to get this right. I've got 2 teenagers myself, so I'm taking that home with me. But Pia and Nuriya, I'd love for you to both respond. How are you seeing AI, not all ed tech generally, but AI specifically, changing the outcomes, or hopefully changing the outcomes for the better in your work?
Thanks for that, and I'm really happy to sit beside Wilson on this. We're so enthusiastic in our work we're doing with Google because of the points you've raised. So I think the first element that is really giving us a lot of hope is how are we building solutions together for contexts where infrastructure isn't at the levels it's expected to be. And your team at DeepMind, really thinking of these AI solutions for low infrastructure contexts. And how will it work so we don't disadvantage children? I think the second area we are really enthusiastic in forming these solutions together is maintaining the diversity that underpins AI, so we don't move into a standardized form of language. We actually draw on the diversity of languages around the world to be able to have access. And finally, I think to stretch the really important point is, what are we doing together that keeps to build human capabilities? Human capabilities for children and the teachers as we do that. But would you allow me very quickly just to talk to Brian's point of opportunity, because we are in this room where I feel we're at a very important point of opportunity where the differentiation of capital is playing a fundamental role in the pipeline of innovation to implementation. And by differentiation of capital, the role the philanthropic capital plays in testing innovation, in bringing ideas, taking some of those risks, linking it up to the more scalable capital, which is brought by governments and domestic resources to be able to sustain those. Education is a public sector offer in the end. And how the philanthropic capital blends with domestic resources for that sustainability and scale up, linking it to private sector capital that takes those solutions across the life course to get the learning to earning pathway completed. And I think those different elements of capital that are represented in this room is an area of opportunity for us to take forward as we envision this world of equal chances for every child to lead this productive life. And I think I want to be able to bring us all into the conversation in that way, because we all have a role to play in this opportunity.
That's great. And Nuriya, can you help us think about opportunities? We'll go into our speed round here as it relates to engaging governments. One has to be very brave to work in close partnership with governments. You've done this so successfully. How should our room be thinking about that as part of the solution set?
Most definitely. I think as far as, look, being in government is not easy. We need to recognize that first. There's an awareness, right? It is public money. It is for public good. There is more gray than black and white. It's often very easy for us on the philanthropic side or on the CSR side or on the business side to expect governments to move fast or move forward or embrace. The needs, and again, a Star Trek example, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And governments need to realize that. So I think as we move ahead, it's coming from a place of recognition. It is also coming from a place of what is the potential today and how we have an open dialogue about it. I think when we work with the governments, and we've seen that trust takes time to build, conversations take time to fructify, pilots and points of views sometimes are not good enough because we don't have the sound assessment around it. We have not done the right impact assessment around it. And governments become cautious because they need, you see, because the variety that they're dealing with, it's not just an urban, it's not a rural, it's an urban, rural, language, culture, economic discrepancy mix. And so I think these things take time. The last thing that I would want to say is that I think work with governments at their starting point, not at your desired starting point. I think it's very important to start there.
Thank you for that. My hope is that as this session comes to a close, you can each think about your portfolio of giving from the perspective of its impact, perhaps starting at the early childhood end, but the link through adolescence to midlife and to older life, the importance of equitable design and inclusion, and really bringing a government and systems lens to your work so that our work is not done in silo and has that opportunity for scale. Please join me in thanking this panel.